Making decisions and tough choices in familiar circumstances and situations is easy. But what do you do when you're faced with an unfamiliar situation? What do you do when you are faced with something that you've never had to deal with before? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Most leaders oftentimes have a plan for how to respond to certain things. For example, to respond to layoffs, to respond to opening a new business, to launching something in a new geography. Most people have a plan to respond to all these different types of things, and that's because these are common situations. These are common occurrences that have arisen before. And so what we do as leaders is we remember what we did in the past. What did we do when we launched our previous business? What did we do when we opened up something in a new geography or we launched a new location? We basically copy and paste, we use that as a template, and that's our blueprint for what we should do the next time something like that happens. But what happens if you're faced with a new situation or a new scenario? Take COVID, for example. How many leaders were caught off guard because they've never had to deal with a pandemic before? Steve Bilt, the CEO of Smile Brands, was telling me that when his employees were talking to him about COVID, he said, guys, this is my first pandemic. I promise for the second pandemic, I'll get things more clear. I'll get things right the second time around. And that was his acknowledgement saying that, look, I've never had to do anything like this before. And many leaders around the world have never had to do anything like this before. So what do you do when you're faced with that kind of a situation? How do you make decisions? How do you approach that unfamiliar problem? Well, I think the answer lies in one of my favorite things, and that is chess. Chess is a virtually limitless game. In fact, there are more possible moves than you can make in a game of chess than there are atoms in the universe. Yes, that's true, you can look it up. And what happens in a lot of Grandmaster games is these top level players, they spend a lot of time studying openings. And openings you study with a computer, and it basically tells you what are the best first 10, 15, sometimes 20 moves that you can make in a game. In other words, you make a move, you know your opponent is gonna make a certain response, you respond, or your opponent responds, and basically you get kind of this tree of moves. In top Grandmasters, they spend a lot of time studying this beginning tree of moves so they can basically blitz out the first 10, 15, 20 moves of a game because they know everything already. But then what happens is you inevitably get to a point in the game where you are playing on your own. You don't remember the computer moves. You are now having to just be with your own thoughts, your own intuition, and it's just you and the other person across the board. You gotta play the game. What do you do? One of the things that top Grandmasters do is they rely on pattern recognition. So when they're looking at the board and they see a certain position set up, they might not have seen an exact position like that before, but maybe they've seen something similar. But maybe, a couple of the pieces were positioned in slightly different ways. And so what a chess grandmaster will do is mentally they will say, well, this isn't quite like that other game I played, but there are some similarities here. And I remember what I did in that previous game, and I can apply some of those similar concepts here. Maybe bring my queen around, maybe put the rook over here, maybe expand with my pawns on the king side. And so a lot of top chess players, they use this form of pattern recognition, especially when they're looking for tactics or when they're trying to find checkmate. It's that pattern recognition that really comes into play. So as a leader, when you're faced with an unfamiliar situation, one of the things that you can look for is patterns. Although the situation itself might be different, maybe there are some components of that situation that you have dealt with before. And you can remember, what did you do in that kind of a situation? What worked well and what didn't? And you can apply some of those ideas into this new unfamiliar situation that you are now finding yourself in front of. Another thing that top Grandmasters do is they go with intuition. They have that sense of intuition, that gut feeling. And for leaders, sometimes we shouldn't underestimate that. I've interviewed a lot of leaders over the years who still very much believe that their intuition plays an important role in the decision-making process. That gut feeling, something that's pulling you in a certain direction or pushing you away from a certain direction. That intuition also is important when you are faced with unfamiliar situations and circumstances. A third thing that chess grandmasters do is calculation. In other words, you calculate moves on the board. If I move my pawn, my opponent will be forced to move their knight, then I could respond by moving my bishop or my queen, then my opponent could respond by castling. You calculate all these moves in your head so that when you play something, you kind of worked out the next 4, 5, 6 moves mentally. As a leader, what that means is that you look at all the information that you have, from all the different sources that you have. This could be something from supply chain, it could be from your marketing team, it could be something from your operations team, something from facilities, whatever it is. You look at all the data and information that you have and you start to calculate, so to speak, in your mind, putting all of that data and information together that will allow you to make the best decision that you can make. Unlike in chess, however, you also have the added benefit of bringing in other people. If I'm playing in a chess tournament, I can't just go to somebody else and say, hey, can you take a look at this position for me? I'm not sure what to play. Can you give me some advice? Can you give me some feedback? That's immediate disqualification. Thankfully, as a leader, you have that luxury of bringing in other people to look at the problem. These could be your peers, your coworkers. They could be people from different departments, different seniority levels, from diverse backgrounds. You can bring in as many people as you need and want to look at this problem with you to help you find a solution or identify an opportunity. As a leader, you also need to remember that you're going to make missteps along the way, and that's okay. I can tell you that from a lot of the chess games that I've played, I learn much more from the losses than I do from my wins. And this is very common in the game of chess, and in fact, in a lot of other sports as well. You learn a lot more from the losses. When playing a game of chess, for example, if I lost, I will remember what I did to lose that game. And I will remember in future games not to make that move because it weakened my king or because I pushed a pawn too fast and I lost to some sort of tactics. I remember a lot of the losses that I have and what I did, but when I think back on the wins, I don't really remember the wins as much. So again, you will remember much more from your losses. You will remember the missteps that you make, but that's okay, because this is where learning comes from. This is where growth comes from. You can't win all the time. You're not gonna make right choices all the time, but as a leader, again, that's okay. So hopefully you find these tips useful and valuable the next time you are presented with an unfamiliar situation or circumstance. Thanks again for tuning into the show, and don't forget to go to 6leadershiptrends.com to grab a copy of my brand new PDF, which is going to walk you through the 6 trends that are shaping leadership and what it means to be a leader. And it will also give you action items for what you should be doing for each one of these 6 trends to adapt and evolve so that you can be a better leader in the future of work. Again, that is 6leadershiptrends.com. You can either spell out the number 6 in the URL or just use the number 6 in the URL. They will both take you to the same place. Thanks again for tuning in.